I bought this Yamaha F4 for $100. It didn't have the starter mechanism. The previous owner told me that it had been used very little and stood still for about 9 years. The outboard has a rather dull engine cover due to exposure to the sun for a long time. It also has some galvanic corrosion in a couple of parts. Still, considering that the anode was in good condition, I suppose that these areas of corrosion will be produced by having been stored in contact with some element that will have caused these corrosion points. The engine was a bit dirty. It had traces of dried gasoline all over it. You will see why later. The engine turned over. It was not seized. The forward gear shifts easily, but the reverse gear would not shift. It was stuck. I spun the engine with the forward gear engaged for a few minutes. The reverse gear began to shift smoothly and the gear shift lever moved easily. The reverse gear shifts and works properly. At this point, I wanted to try to start it to see if it would work. So I checked the spark plug, which was in good condition, and checked the oil level. Everything seemed fine for a test start. After some searching, I got a bucket and filled it with water to cool the engine. Now I just had to add some gasoline to see if the engine would start. To start the engine, I used a rope with a knot at one end to hook it into the slot in the starter pulley. After doing some tests without gasoline and without the kill switch so that the engine would not start, I determined the length of the line I had to wind, which in this case was about 3 turns. After several pulls, gasoline to fill the filter and the carburetor. Finally the engine started, but after a few seconds it died. I started it again, but it would always come down and shut off, so I decided to disassemble and clean the carburetor. Let's get to work. The first thing I did was disconnect the fuel supply hose. Next, I disconnected the throttle and choke cables. 2 screws held the carburetor. To remove them, I first took off the 2 covers that shield the screw heads. With the covers removed, I began loosening the screws. With the screws loosened, the carburetor can now be carefully removed. With the carburetor removed, the first thing to do is to remove the drain screw. When I removed the screw, gasoline with impurities came out. The next step was to remove the screws holding the float chamber cover and remove it. Here I began to realize that the carburetor had been previously disassembled by someone who did not work very well. You can see that the float chamber gasket is missing, which probably explains all the yellowish layers of dried gasoline in that area of the engine. Next, I removed the rubber cap to access the main nozzle, disassembled it, and then cleaned it by inserting a thin wire through its various holes. Once cleaned, I reassembled it. Now, it was time to disassemble the main jet and the air slow jet. The slot to place the screwdriver was a little stripped, as I said before. This carburetor had been disassembled by someone a little clumsy. It took me a while to loosen it, but I finally got it. This piece is the one that was clogged. When I put the wire in, I could see how little by little the dirt was being removed, and the wire was going in and out more easily. After cleaning the two pieces, I reassembled them. Finally, I removed the upper carburetor plate that is held by 3 screws and also removed the rubber gasket, which by the way was quite stuck. I did this to be able to access and clean a small hole in the carburetor inlet. I reassembled the different parts I had disassembled from the carburetor and mounted the carburetor on the outboard motor. All that was left was to try starting it again. A couple of pulls to get the gasoline back to the carburetor. And it started. Now, all that remains is fine-tuning it, installing the starting mechanism and installing the missing carburetor gasket. You'll see this in another video I'll make. Thank you for watching the video. Fair winds and following sea.